few people that we sent it out to, everyone was kind of up in the air if they can make it or not. So I think if anyone else comes on, they'll just join in a little late.
That's fine. And like we said before, Julie, you can always direct them to the recording. That'll be up in for a couple of weeks, and that way people can make comments and whatever else they have to do.
Perfect.
All right, we'll make it work for everybody. All right. Well, I guess we can put up our slides and I'll introduce the team and the process.
Hopefully everyone can see that okay.
Yeah, can everybody see the screen okay?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Well, my name is Bill Napolitano. I work in the environmental program at Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District, SRPEDD. I'm here with my colleague Helen Sienkiewicz tonight. She's the Director of Environmental Programs at SRPEDD. And this is actually the fourth phase of the Acushnet MVP planning process, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Planning process. And this is the public listening session. This is where we've take everything that you have given us. We've worked with the town, we've worked with the local committee to determine local strengths, vulnerabilities, priority projects, things that we could use assistance with, whatever, and put them in this report for public reaction and to submit to the state for certification. The listening session allows the public who could not participate in the process directly an opportunity to look at the priorities that were developed during the plan, look at the mapped sites to go along with those priorities, and have up to 2 weeks to make comments on these. It could be positive comments, it could be additional comments, it could be sites that maybe weren't added for some reason during the process. So again, we'll be accepting these comments before we put together a final version of the report for the town. So here we are tonight. If you saw the first slide, we came in as the Resilient Taunton Watershed Network when I was working with Henry Young, your former planner. Because of COVID, Acushnet actually became the only town that SRPEDD has worked with and completed the process entirely remotely, respecting local and state COVID-19 restrictions and protocols. So SRPEDD was the primary provider for this one. We usually work with our team, so this is totally unique to the SRPEDD district, and Acushnet's totally unique in this process. Next slide. So this is where we are. You start out, we get the grant. We actually had a core team meeting with the town last November, as town staff meeting pretty much. We talked about what we're going to do, how we were going to do it, planned out things, tried to figure out how we do things best remotely. And then we sent out invitations, we gathered data, and we continued to stay in touch with the town to set up ideal dates for actual sessions to be carried out. In the interim, unfortunately, Henry Young, your planner, had to resign. So we had a little bump in the road, but we overcame that. And on March 12th and March 19th of 2021, we set up remote sessions in the town of Acushnet. And that's where we are now. We're at the end of the plan. And our next step is going to be to take action. That's that dark blue arrow at the end of the slide. Next slide. The beauty of the process, like I said, it's usually done very much in person. It's very collaborative. It's locally led. When we work with you, we literally plan with you, not at you. You tell us what you think Acushnet does well, where you're potentially vulnerable, where you could potentially use some help, where there are potentially regional issues. And it utilizes, the process itself it's very accessible, utilizes partnerships, and it really tries to mainstream climate change into everything you do, your master planning, your open space planning, any land use planning, water resource planning, the whole bit. So it informs all your local planning efforts. And in the end, when your plan is certified, it positions municipalities that are certified to get into many of the state grants programs and actually have principal access to it. And the coordinator, the local municipal vulnerability program coordinator for the state, Courtney Rocha, who is an equal partner in this process, has been absolutely fabulous to work with and will be a tremendous asset going forward for the town once this plan is approved and certified. Next slide. So all of the data that we mined for Acushnet to see how climate change would impact the area going forward up to 2050 is contained in the Massachusetts State Hazard Mitigation and Climate Adaptation Plan. It's probably the best scientific data available, and separate categories for actually municipal vulnerability preparedness were set up within the context of the data repository that was set up. Next slide. And this is where you can get that data, access to this data, resilientma.org, and it breaks down the state watershed by watershed, municipality by municipality. It talks about climate predictors, climate stressors, everything you would ever want to see. If you want to go in there and you're curious about climate data and potential future impacts of climate change in your area or in the South Coast in general, I would recommend highly going in there. Next slide. And if you do go in there, you will see this page, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness. And it's, again, set up by watersheds, towns, the whole bit. And just about any piece of data that you would want is found here as far as climate change goes. Next slide. And this is just some of the stuff that we went through before with your core team last November and during the presentations that we made in March. These are just predicted. Some of it's observed climate change, things that happened already that we've lived through. And you can see it's pretty drastic, going back to 1895. Temperature changes, the growing season change, which really affects a town like Acushnet that has a lot of agricultural land. Sea level rise, obviously, because you're on the coast also. And heavy precipitation, the amount of storms, especially in the last 30, 35 years. Next slide. And this is predicted climate changes going to 2090. And this is if we don't do nothing really to correct the course that we're on right now. And again, we've made these presentations before. This presentation is available as part of your report and as part of your project page. Next slide. This is one of the things that really hits towns the greatest, to talk about the changing use and energy demand. Because of rising temperatures or predicted rising temperatures in the area, the changing use and energy demand is going to go down, home heating and the whole bit. But on the flip side, the need for cooling stations, and those types of resources is going to create a tremendous spike during warm weather, summer days, the whole bit. So we could potentially, again, be overwhelmed. But again, these are based on doing nothing, just proceeding in the course we're on. But the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, fortunately, is probably a leader amongst climate change mitigation, climate change strategizing and planning in the country. So you're part of it. Next slide. This is one of the things, and we're experiencing it right now, extreme heat in Massachusetts. This is what's predicted, by mid-century. Number 90-degree days, 95-degree days, even 100-degree days. And again, these are all things that we're going to have to learn how to cope with as far as, heating relief, cooling stations, what we do, as far as land use, construction, retention of our green infrastructure, our forests, our wetlands, our waterways. Next. And what the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program really stresses is nature-based solutions, working with nature or using systems that mimic natural processes to help abate natural hazards like flooding, erosion, and help offset drought and heat island effects in more urbanized areas. Next. So what does the MVP program do? It provides you with the resources to do planning, the online data, the ability to identify your areas of risk and your areas of strength, develop, and prioritize community adaptation plans, identify opportunities, and, receive MVP designation. And with MVP designation in the plan, it makes you eligible for MVP action grants, which is the next phase you'd be kicked into. And the action grants are a wonderful resource for towns, especially doing assessments in areas that really need looks after long periods of time, doing coordinated planning, working with your neighbors. Actually, a lot of it now is based on how you can work on almost a watershed or small watershed scale. So there's a lot of opportunity out there once this plan gets certified by the state. Next slide. And certified MVP communities receive, again, priority ranking. Action grants are only given to MVP certified communities. And these are some of the state programs that you'd be given priority ranking in should you apply for grants based on your MVP needs analysis. And it's the whole litany of things. You basically go into the mass grants portal right now, and they can help you find the appropriate grant for the appropriate measure. Next slide. So some of the MVP action grant project types, again, a detailed vulnerability risk assessment, community outreach and education. And this came up a lot during our sessions too, when we were going over our planning process. Local bylaws, ordinances, we talked about that. Redesigns and retrofits. That came up especially when we were talking about detention basins, some culverts around town, retaining wall. There are a number of issues that came up. And there are also a number of plans that have been done that are seeking funding. Again, this is perfect opportunity to maybe implement these types of things. And you're looking at nature-based infrastructure and technology solutions to reduce vulnerability to extreme heat and poor air quality, nature-based solutions to reduce vulnerability to other climate change impacts, ecological restoration and habitat management to increase resiliency. Again, where you have plans in place, this is a perfect opportunity for you to maybe fund these plans and implement them. Next slide. And in 2019, because of demand, certain types of projects were added. Energy resilience grants, chemical safety, working with the Office of Technical Assistance, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to look at businesses and industries on safe chemical storage, proper, manifesting. And one of the big things that was a result of what happened in Houston a couple of years ago. I mean, that was a torrential, probably century type flood, but it could also happen here, especially in our low-lying areas. Our watersheds are very low-lying. So land acquisition for resilience. And that one came up with one of your neighbors too. They actually utilized that. And subsidized low-income housing resident strategies, to help create better situations for vulnerable populations. And a big one, obviously, the last couple of years have been mosquito control districts. And actually supplying technical assistance and materials to communities that have had, severe EEE problems, even tick-borne diseases, the whole bit, a lot of vector-borne diseases in general. Next slide. All right, these are some examples of some nature-based solutions for resilience. Living shorelines, cranberry bog restoration, watershed land protection, salt marsh restoration, brook stabilization, tree planting for heat island and reduced runoff. And a lot of times in your urbanized areas, this is a great, great program. Designing with nature for flood proofing, nature-based road and stream crossings, culverts, and short span bridges. We talked about that during our planning process. Floodplain restoration and reclamation where possible. Preserving natural green infrastructure, again, our forests, our wetlands, our waterways, and our soils in a community like Acushnet, the carbon sequestration in agricultural soils is tremendous. Forestry for emergency management. A lot of people just want to do forestry plans, but you really have to look at the emergency management aspect of it. Forestry management plans in general won't be funded through this program. Next slide. And this is what I was talking about before, an example of an action grant project over in Mattapoisett. They purchased 120 acres of land, forest, streams, freshwater wetlands, and coastal salt marsh in conjunction with partners to protect and preserve this area for now and into the future. Obviously, it's going to be a great flood storage area, but in the meantime, it serves also as a great open space, coastal access. But again, it's the way that we look at open space and plan for open space and the use for open space that's really going to change as far as how we invest in open space in our communities. It's going to be as much for function as it is for purpose and location. Next slide. So what did the overall planning process involved? Well, at first we did our overview of what we looking at as characterizing hazards locally, and then identify our community vulnerabilities and strengths. And that was in the first session. And we concentrate in 3 areas. We concentrate on infrastructure, environment, and society. And society can include structures, policies, and practices as well. In the second session, we identify and prioritize our community actions, and we developed an overall priority action plan and strategy outlook. And then the end of it, the plan, we put it all together. And that's where we come up with the map and the matrix and worked with the community. Now, again, this is usually a very, very open process. We usually work in large meeting rooms. We have tables, maps, markers, stickers, and people kind of go at it. So doing this in a completely online manner was, again, new to us and obviously new to the town, but we really made it work. My crew at SRPEDD really put together a great way of utilizing the tools that the state gave us as far as boards, recording tools as matrices, and the mapping ability by using some ArcGIS tools. We were able to actually work with people in the room remotely in Acushnet to find spots specifically identified through the process and tag them right to the matrix right there. So like I said, it was unique, it was different, but it worked out very, very well. Next slide. And this is the matrix that we use. We identify what are the top priorities as far as priority hazards that affect Acushnet that we thought were affecting Acushnet. And I thought one thing, it's usually standard, extreme weather, extreme temperatures, flood drought cycle. But the folks in Acushnet really had a sense of history, but recent history. Their fourth option was unique weather events. And we talked about things like water spouts that had occurred, the recent winter hurricanes, tornadoes, high wind and infrequent types of storms and storm activities, and how they really affected, even if it was on a one-time basis, certain areas of town and were really devastating. So I think the whole idea there was that the town wanted to be cognizant of the history, the recent history, and the fact that it had occurred so recently, but you don't want to lose that institutional memory. You always want to be prepared for the most extreme events. So I thought that was pretty cool. No other town that I've worked with has put that down as a potential concern or an overriding concern as far as the top priority hazards. And as you can see with the matrix, we work on infrastructural, societal, and environmental concerns as far as where it's located, what the ownership is it a vulnerability or a strength? And again, I've mentioned this a few times. The state really is interested in what you perceive as environmental or social or infrastructural vulnerabilities in your town, but they also want to know what you think you do well. What's a strength? Is it something you've addressed recently? Is it a policy that you have in place? Is it some type of intermunicipal agreement as far as emergency response goes? The different things that you do and you do well. And again, that doesn't mean that it's an end all, because if you're doing things well, but could use assistance to make it even better, it's important to put it down and acknowledge the fact that you do it, but you could use maybe help to kick it up to the next level. So that's why it's there, vulnerability and strength. And some of the things that we went over in the planning process actually tipped both categories. They were vulnerabilities and strengths, because when you talked about them in the long term, you didn't want to lose sight of the fact that they could become vulnerable or weak or susceptible, over a period of years. So they want to keep track of things. Then we looked at priority. Is it high, medium, or low priority? And then we look at the action. Is it something that we want to address right away? Something that could be long-term, or something that it could be an ongoing concern. So all of this goes built into the matrix. Next slide. And again, this is something that, and Helen's blowing it up for us. This is a map that, working with the local crew in the planning process, it probably wasn't as much fun as using markers, pens, stickers, and whatever else we usually use in a crowded room. But it actually allowed the members who were taking part in the planning process to interact with our person who was controlling the GIS map and literally guide them around town and bring them to the points that they wanted to make sure were emphasized on this map. So you'll see green dots on there for environmental areas of concern, red dots on there for infrastructural areas of concern, and blue dots on there for societal areas of concern. Next. And out of the whole process, the top MVP action items and priorities from the planning process were infrastructure, repair or replace the Main Street retaining wall. That came up in 2 sessions. They were talking about the potential of environmental impact, but also obviously infrastructure, and they say it's an imminent danger to collapse. And then the other one was address the flooding on Mendel Road. And that's maybe one of those areas where the town has a stormwater management plan or an idea of what they'd like to do with stormwater, and maybe just need some funding or something to kickstart the whole process. But again, that came up repeatedly in the sessions. As far as the environment goes, the top one was address climate-related crop losses, which are degrading the local food system. And obviously you got new pests, drought, late frost. You saw the graphic before in the growing season, how much it's changed, the 15-day swing in the growing season. And one of the things that really came up with this too is some folks, again, alluding to the old days and the assistance that was available, cooperative extension is no longer in the county. And they provided a lot of relief to the farms and farmers. And luckily in Acushnet, there are folks who are volunteering their time to help out. But this may be something that we could ask for the Mass Department of Agricultural Resources to come down and take a look at, work with our colleagues at CMAP, and really make this a partnership issue locally, because this has come up with as an issue in several of our rural towns. And again, the amount of carbon that is sequestered in agricultural soil is tremendous. And you don't want to risk losing that soil, to development or being stripped, anything like that. So if we can help our farmers be farmers and help retain the art and practice of farming and the ability to feed ourselves, we will be much more resilient as a community and as a region. So that was really, really important. I was glad it was brought up. And the other thing we started talking about, if you look on the map, there's going to be a number of places where there's detention ponds, culverts, things like that, drainage structures. And it just came to light that we should do an evaluation of detention ponds town-wide, because there was no sense of agreement on the timing of when it was last looked at. But we did figure out that a lot of it had become overgrown and probably requires maintenance in order to serve as an optimal stormwater retention facility. So that, again, that is a perfect, an assessment activity of this nature is perfect for an MVP action grant. In society, I think in conjunction with environmental top priorities, again, keep drainage basins dry and well functioning to limit their role in breeding mosquitoes, which introduce, again, vector-borne disease and are a public health hazard. And the other big thing that came up was, as well as the town does do some things, they're looking at really installing cooling stations in the schools, especially that are not yet air conditioned. And as we start dealing with these high temperatures and extended periods of heat into the fall, cooling is going to be a real necessity. I know a lot of schools have had to actually curtail the school day when it gets too hot. So this is something, again, that we can look at, do an assessment of the school system and the needs, and some of the potential projects that could come out of that. And I think what I'd like Helen to do right now is put up the map and the matrix in general and kind of scroll down it. And what I'd like to do while she's doing that is go over some of the strengths that people brought up during the working session, because I think you guys did a tremendous job of looking at what you do and do well. So some of the things infrastructurally. Actually, I'll start out with environmental strengths, because that one came up. The fact that you do have so much conservation in open land, and people cited specific spots in town, town forest, areas near the quarry, the Acushnet River Conservation Area, obviously, Quaker Wells, things like that. The fact that you've been able to set aside so much conservation land and realize the value and the function and the services that conservation land provide the town, that's a real feather in your hat. And again, because you do it well doesn't mean it's an end all, and it doesn't mean you can't ask for assistance to try to secure more, especially to help retain intact wildlife corridors, natural resource corridors, things like that. And one of the other benefits that you really saw was the strength of working with partners like the Buzzards Bay Coalition to help maintain properties, and again, help look at and acquire properties. Obviously, the whole idea of solar farms came up, and some of the agricultural land maybe being lost to that. On the upside, they said a lot of the land didn't have to be stripped, but on the downside, it's still a loss of land. But one of the positives that came out of this, and I thought this was really good, I think there were only two other communities that I've worked with that have mentioned this, but the town said they're working with UMass Amherst on getting pollinator certifications on fields, which again is tremendous. And in a farming community, I always recommend that. Your pollinators are what helping put forkfuls of food in your mouths. So, and keeping your farmers farmers. So that, again, that is a tremendous strength, and I'm glad you brought it up, and the town recognizes it. And the fact that you have partners who are willing to help people and who are willing to donate land and use their land around the river, allow people public access. Again, that's a strength, and that's a real sense of community. That's a heart and soul type of community thing. As far as societal strengths, I think this was great. We had first responders on there. I think the provisions for emergency shelters and vulnerable populations, vehicles to pick people up and to get people to warming stations. The fire chief and the Council on Aging that made great efforts at providing these services. The fact that the river separates the town really doesn't impact services as greatly as it could, because the town has made sure that there are response services on both sides, and access to emergency personnel is a huge strength. That was cited by just about everybody. They're always around the town and always available to help the residents. There's a presence of the police and it's a strong and positive presence within the town. So it's reflective of a good partnership. And one of the other things too, we've worked in a lot of communities where, people generally have complaints about utilities, but Eversource was really called out for the efforts that they've made, and that they've, some of the assets they provided the town with, like cots and blankets in the short term during sheltering needs, and the fact that they're good about maintenance as far as tree trimming along sidewalks, utility ways, the whole bit. And one of the other things that was cited as a strength is the expanding sewer and water service, and that most of the town has water service, and you're looking to expand sewer service. So that's great as far as water quality impacts go. And this is another one I really like, because I love repurposing older buildings, and folks in the town said that they've really done a great job with using existing buildings and repurposing existing structures. And again, that's part of what resilience is all about. And as far as particular infrastructure strengths, the bridge Slocum Street over the Acushnet River, it's in good shape now, but one of the things you did want to look at was long-term planning for the next generation. Again, you're thinking ahead, which is great. The Robinson Road culvert, Mass DOT, we did that recently, so that works out well. And then, again, Eversource, the fact that they come in every year and do the tree trimming along the utility routes. Again, it's a good relationship to have with your local utility provider. So those are some of the strengths that I wanted to bring out that people cited during the planning process. And again, your top resources there, or top vulnerability and needs, they will be noted in the plan. Each one of them usually have a top 3, but we gave everybody kind of a 1 and 1A because people were really passionate about what they were and what the need was in particular. And again, I would say as community at large, and even those people who participated in the process, if you want to take a look at these things again, take a look at the matrix, take a look at the map, see what you've put down, see if you want to make any additions, see if you've adequately described the problem, see if you've adequately described it as a vulnerability or strength, and any additions that you would like us to make, just please send your ideas to myself or Helen, We'll have contact information up. And again, this presentation and this matrix and map will be available on the town website and on the SRPEDD website. And once all of the comments are collected, the plan will be finalized. It will be submitted to the town for review, and then it will be submitted to the state for certification. And that's it. Anybody have any questions as far as top priorities? Anything that was done, the planning process itself?
I just want to show really quickly while people are mulling over questions. So in the end, this is what the matrix looks like when we submit it with the plan. And as Bill said, it will be posted for reference, but it has an ID number. It calls out the feature that it's addressing, the location, whether it's a vulnerability or a strength, and then kind of the actual issue that we're interested in addressing. And then with the kind of core team and participants in the planning process that met, give it a high, medium, or low priority, and then that short, long, or ongoing time frame. So we have the categories of infrastructure, environmental, you can see that there is quite a lot of, a decent amount of actual recommendations. So while the town kind of had to rank their top 3 to 6, as you go forward, and if one of these other objectives kind of becomes more pressing, or there's an opportunity, the town will have this matrix and does have the ability to go back to the core team and say, hey guys, let's just convene and rethink our priorities, and we're going to set a different action as our priority. So the program is flexible in that way. It just takes a little bit of convening at the local level to update that prioritization. And then the societal activities here. So that's kind of the format. And then when we post the link and all of this information on the website, we'll also post the interactive map. So this is kind of what we actually did the planning process in. Like Bill said, it was virtual, and we had this nice interface to work within. And so if you click on any of these, it does bring up, it brings up exactly kind of what we recorded during the planning session. So what it is we're talking about, in this case, the town forest land, wanting to assess that townwide. And the kind of issue is that the need is to understand the health of the trees, impacts of invasive species, because as we know, with climate change and increased drought, you have increased risk for things like fire, or just want to maintain the health of your forest as best you can when we're facing these climate hazards. So yeah, that's kind of the structure of what we have here. And each of the little dots has their information. So you can read about, for example, if this was a social action and wanted to make sure to, and actually it was not even a vulnerability, it was that it is a strength that these kind of facilities exist in town, and that there's no kind of emergency access issues. They aren't at risk of being cut off during a storm event or anything like that. So we took those kinds of notes as we went through the process. But yeah, so all that information is in the map and is in the matrix, and you can kind of cross-reference the two and definitely explore all of the actions that were proposed.
Yeah, and again, it was something very unique. I think it was a challenge that for both sides, but I think Helen and the crew at SRPEDD did a tremendous job with the map and the interactive mapping. And the Acushnet project is going to be the only one of its kind like this that we have in our library. So, like Helen said, take advantage of it. Take a cruise, look at what people did, look at the hard work and planning that your local crew did, and see what you think. Again, it's your plan. We were there to plan with you and help you facilitate these things, and I think you guys did a great job.
And I think the last thing that, or we can definitely take any kind of questions or comments, but in the chat in a minute here, I'm just going to stop sharing for now.
Mm-hmm.
We can always bring the map back up if you guys want to look at it and everything. But we will. I'm going to. Can you guys see that chat window pop up? Maybe not. I just want to give you the web address where all this will be posted at SRPEDD. And so I'll just say it. I wish I could type it somewhere, or maybe I can just bring up, just put it in a Word document. Hold on one second.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions or comments or on the process, we'd love to hear them.
Bill, I would just like to say, this is Pam Labonte, that I really appreciate you and your team taking the time and sitting down with us, even though we needed to do it remotely. That's the first time I've ever been involved with something like that. And I thought it was very well done. You wouldn't have known it was the first time that you guys did this. So I thank you. And I definitely can see that you were able to bring out a lot in each of our members, things within the community that can either be worked on or that need improvements or are strengths of ours. So I just want to say that I appreciate all of the efforts that you've all made.
Thank you very much, Pam, and I'm happy that you think you have a plan that you can be proud of, and obviously that can be worked on into the future. And we'd be more than happy to keep working with you in any capacity. And again, thank you, because it's folks like you guys. If you don't come out and plan, then there is no plan, because we can't plan for Acushnet. It's all up to you guys. So your time, your commitment, and your effort, what you saw tonight is what you did, and it really paid off.
I just want to quickly concur with Pam. Sorry, I've been trying to find a quiet time to jump in. You guys were so helpful, and you've done so much for our community. And I agree, you would never know that this was the first time that you went through a remote process. It was so seamless on our side. So we just appreciate you guys and all the hard work you put into this. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was our pleasure. Yeah. Have this up on the screen for a couple of minutes, but just so it's in the public record, and if anyone wants to know where to access this stuff in the comment period and who to contact with comments, that's right there.
And we really appreciate your comments. I know Helen and I will pass it on to the rest of our team, Kevin Ham, Sarah Brown, and Taylor Perez. They did a great job. Like I said, I'm the old goat of the crew, and these young guys really, they flew around this in the remote process like nothing. They figured it out pretty quickly, and they did a tremendous job.
Bill, I'm sorry, I missed your email. Oh, thank you.
I'll read it out loud too, just for accessibility.
Yeah.
So you can access the maps and matrix at SRPEDD, SRPEDD.org/comprehensive-planning/environment/ and then you can contact me, Helen, at HZINCAVAGE@SRPEDD, SRPEDD.org. And you can contact Bill at BNAP SRPEDD.org.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys, if there's no more questions or comments at this time, and again, like there's a good window to get in touch. We can conclude here and then get all this posted.
Great. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
All right, folks,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much.
You did a great job. Pleasure to work with you.
Same. Thank you guys. Take care.
Bye.
Good night.
Night.